Okay, so we have finished chapter 2, and from here on, every chapter we finish, we're just going to give a little review at the end to talk about the themes discussed here in this chapter, some of the more high water marks that we learned about during this chapter, and just give a general overview of our thoughts of the segment. So we finished chapter 2 of A People's History of Howard Zinn, and I gotta say, it was a sad one. You know, if you were able to keep a dry eye through that, I commend you, because it was not an easy thing to read, especially for people who were just being introduced to the new, true history of the United States. But I should say that, you know, every chapter of A People's History does contain at least a glimmer of hope. And this one, chapter 2, Drawing the Color Line, was no exception. In this chapter, we learned about how the slave trade broke down cultural, significant barriers, and even at times when there was adversity and there was threats of violence against slaves who ran away, people could overcome that simply for being in contact with people who had been in similar circumstances. Poor whites and poor blacks can unite in spite of tremendous odds, and have before. You know, even though the slave trade continued and broadly those atrocities were, those just stormed on ahead due to the profit motive, even then, there is still hope. We read about how there were white ministers and clergymen who had absolutely no scruples about slaves being held in bondage and abused. Absolutely no scruples whatsoever. But I want people to remember that the source of racism is a fear-based ideology, fear of the other, which existed and still exists out of necessity economically for those who are at the advantageous end of that oppression. You can't be the same in their mind, because if you're seen as the same, just another type of person, that can't be. The system of oppression can't continue. Slavery was continued out of convenience, economic advantage. And it wasn't necessarily as though whites despised blacks categorically and hated them. We were treated unironically, not metaphorically, as livestock. They treated us as cows, as meat. And it was in this way that slavery was allowed to continue. You can start to understand why, slave masters were so fearful of slave uprisings, because they knew that ultimately we are people. They implicitly understand the truth, which is why they had to treat us like cattle. No, you must be something other than human in order for us to continue oppressing you. That's why that existed. It's worse than hatred. It's fear. Not just fear of the other, but fear of you having the knowledge of what has been done to you. That is the source of racism. It's the fear of reprisal for damage done.